I think this is a great opportunity as long as the U.S. Trade Representative is in the compromise mode as opposed to the dictate mode. If they're in the dictate mode and they force the Prime Minister into a deal that's a bad deal for Canada, he won't do it. I know him. I know his team. They won't do a bad deal for Canada. That being said, I think we have a short window here where we can come together and do a deal in principle, an agreement in principle. You can't do the whole thing, but I think there's a way to get there over the next few days if compromise is in the heart of USTR.
Even with obviously few days to work against this self-imposed deadline, a rebranding of the agreement that seems to isolate them out of the deal, you think you like Canada's hand here?
Well, I don't mind Canada's hand as long as the U.S. plays in a fair way. Doesn't mean we don't play strong, but we need to play fair. I think that Canada, everybody needs to just take a deep breath here. Canada, especially in light of the president's recent tweet, Canada has a surplus with the United States, $670 billion. We have a surplus in steel. We have a surplus with the United States in dairy. And we create millions of jobs. 35 states, the #1 export is to Canada. So we need to make sure that if the next 3 days don't go well, that the United States doesn't start beating on Canada and doing all the things that the president was threatening on auto tariffs and the like, or this market's going to turn around very quickly.
Ambassador Wayne, the thing we don't know as well is whether or not Mexico is okay with a deal that doesn't include Canada, right? Even some senators have been asked about that and say, ask the Mexicans.
Well, I think the Mexicans really want Canada to be involved in this. It just makes a lot of sense. The real progress that has taken place over the 25 years has been the integration across North America. Canada has been a big part of that. Canada is our #1 trading partner, Mexico #3. For Mexico, it's really important that they have a predictable future with the U.S. market. No question about that. And that's why they were negotiating so seriously and reached this preliminary agreement. But it's important to note that it is a preliminary agreement in principle. So there's a lot of work still to do, even with Mexico. But a key part is bringing in that northern partner to this negotiation now.
Ambassador Heyman, we've had former U.S. trade reps on our air in the last 24 hours who have said that there are going to be two big sticking points with Canada, Chapter 19 and dairy, and they've argued that those are two sticking points that they don't believe the Canadians will be willing to negotiate on them. But I can't help but think that if we get to a point where there's no deal with Canada, that's still worse than some sort of deal with Canada. You really think that they would walk away and let that happen?
Well, let's start with dairy. I mean, the reality is that Canada provided additional dairy access when they did their negotiations with CETA. They provided it with TPP. And I think that the Canadians have shown some leeway without giving up their supply management entirely. And I think that even the U.S. Agricultural Secretary did not ask for the elimination of supply management in dairy. So I think there's a path there. I think the dispute resolution may be the most difficult, that's Chapter 19. That is when we have a disagreement with each other, that we have an independent body put together to resolve that, as opposed to, hey, just sue me in the U.S. courts, which I think I can understand why any country would be concerned about that. But I do think there are paths to getting this deal done as long as there's compromise on all sides.
Ambassador Wayne, we had Senator Toomey on earlier talking about not knowing a lot of the details. You mentioned, of course, the agreement being preliminary. What should we be focused on as we learn more about the details in terms of areas where there still could be some open questions of importance?
Well, I think one of the important points is to get reaction from the auto sector. One of the big questions is, what will these new rules do to competitiveness of North American autos? Both the cost for American consumers, but also we export about 20% of our production to the rest of the world. So it's very important to get those expert views, people who actually build the autos, to comment on it. Secondly, there have been a number of changes in the dispute settlement proposal. So companies in certain sectors will be concerned about that. Third, I think we'll want to see some of the details in the labor chapter. This has been a real point of interest for a number of Democrats and unions, so especially vis-a-vis Mexico, of course. And so that's going to be important to get those details. it will be very important to see now these other comments of stakeholders as this goes forward. And then the big issue vis-a-vis Canada, of course, and Congress, is that Congress was asked to look at a trilateral agreement. And a number of congressmen have already spoken out saying it's really important that this final agreement be trilateral, and we're not sure that we would approve it if it's not.